Hey, and welcome to our series on how to use adapters and serializers within Ember data. The rough plan is for it to be about 10 parts, and today we're going to be starting with an overview of how to use adapters and serializers within your app. So the basic distinction is that adapters, they determine the URL. So that's the place that you're going to be sending this request. And then the serializers, they determine both the data you send and the data you get back. So it takes what's in your Ember data model and it serializes it into something that you can send to the server, and then it normalizes the data that you get back from the server. I'm going to show you how to get started quickly with both adapters and serializers. So for adapters, you go to the adapters folder, then application.js. And then you get your chosen adapter and you extend it. And for serializers, it's very similar. Serializers folder, application.js, and then you get your favorite serializer and you extend it. And by saying that you can choose which adapter or serializer you use, well, that implies there are choices, and there are. So these are the ones that come bundled with Ember Data 2.0. And so the adapter, we have the REST adapter and the JSON API adapter. And for the serializers, we have first the JSON serializer, which I don't think is in heavy direct use, but it's apparent to both the REST serializer and the JSON API serializer. And because I use Rails, I like to add these to this graph. And of course, it's not just active model adapter and serializer that you can add. There are also other ones on Ember Observer that you can add. Here's a useful listing of 30 add-ons that change your adapter. Active model adapter is probably the most popular, but there are plenty for whatever you need. And of course, if you have a use case that isn't covered by one of these 30, we're going to tell you enough in this series that you can get started on building your own. So the reason we have different adapters and serializers is because different servers require different endpoints, and they require the data to be massaged in different ways. And of course, you can have this differences between apps, but you can also have differences between endpoints in the same app. So let's say we had a model called repositories, and we wanted to change the adapter for this model because this model is actually stored on GitHub. So what we would do is we would make a new file in the adapters folder, and we would call that file repository.js. And then we could extend the application adapter, or we could put in a REST adapter or a completely different type of adapter. And then once we're there, we can make changes to the configuration. Here, we're going to be changing the host so that it's going to GitHub instead of our server. So in this application, almost everything is going to our Rails server through the active model adapter, which we've pulled in through an add-on. But the repository is using the built-in REST adapter and going to the host github.com. This is a very simple and easy example of some of the vast diversity that Ember data can give you in endpoints while still giving you sane defaults. Because for all our other models, we don't have to define anything else. It's just going to use the active model adapter because it's inherited from application.js. So far, we've expended quite a bit of energy on how to have different adapters in your app, as well as seeing what different types of adapters there are. But how do we actually use these adapters? How do they get used? Well, we can find the public API of the adapters and the serializers in the base class ds.serializer and ds.adapter. These are abstract base classes not meant to be used directly. They are to be overridden. And as we see, they're overridden in several different ways, as well as ways you can customize. But they include the public API, which for the serializer is pretty easy. It has serialize, which takes the data that you currently have in your store, and it serializes it into the type that your server wants. And normalize does the opposite. It takes the data that's sent to you by the server and then it puts it into the form that Ember data wants for store.push. Now, what's interesting to note is that these methods, although they're a public API to the serializer, are usually not called directly by your app code. It's called by, I'm not exactly sure on this, but I believe it's called by the store. But anyways, it's called by something else in Ember data. But we can define these to make the behavior different. That's important to note when we go into the adapter-based class, because we're going to see some stuff that looks really familiar, like create record, delete record, find all, find many, update record. We've seen these before, but they're slightly different than how they are in the store. In the store, we'll look at create record, and we're not going to go over this a whole lot, but notice the shape of it, and then in the REST adapter, create record is very different. That's because they're doing different things. In the adapter, create record is saying, what URL do we need to send this to? And in the store, it's actually creating it in the Ember data store. And so when you see these methods, know that they're different than the methods that we've seen before that are called by the same name. Although if you call create record on the store, it usually ends up eventually calling create record on the adapter. So this has been the first part in this series, showing how to use adapters and serializers. We'll get into a lot more detail on this later. In the next episode, we're going to be showing how to customize these, the basics of what we can change and how that works. I'll see you then.